Welcome to the Michigan Realty Business Podcast, where we discuss everyday business concepts with Michigan's local entrepreneurs and business owners. I'm Jeff Rutledge, and I'm a licensed realtor at Signature Sotheby's in downtown Birmingham, Michigan. And I'm the founder of MichiganRealty.org. Today, my guest is Nick Mattar. Nick is a professor at Wayne State University Mike Ilitch School of Business, and he's the founder of Digital Detroit. From a business standpoint, digital marketing provides businesses greater insight into consumer information, patterns, and habits of people, and it helps provide us better understanding of the decisions that we make as consumers. Today, you and I are going to head down the rabbit hole of digital marketing with Nick as we first jump into this discussion, talking about social media's positives and negatives in the way that it influences us as people. Before I begin, I would like to emphasize that this conversation is separate from my practice as a realtor here in the state of Michigan. It is, however, part of my desire to uplift Michigan and business owners that make up our community and the places that we call home. Without any more delay, please let me introduce Nick Mattar. All right, Nick. So, social media, okay? It's got both a positive connotation and a negative connotation nowadays, right? And yep. I think the more you pay attention to the news, the more you start to see some of the more negative outcomes of social media. How much of that is the platform versus how much of that is marketing and advertising, in your opinion?
Oh, man, what a loaded question.
Yeah, thank you.
You know, I could go a lot of different ways with this. And if I'm being honest, I think most of the negativity and the whole aspect of social media being such a damaging place is largely driven by the individual aspect of it and the ability to stay anonymous and private, where anything you say, you can make it so that there's no repercussion. There's no way to hold you accountable for it. And so this idea of people being able to troll others and share these extreme views, and then for others to just pile on top of it, makes it so that you as the individual are seeing things and reading things that you may never see, you may never hear in your day-to-day. And right. Yet these may not even be legitimate perspectives. These may be people that are just trying to get a ruse out of you. And so I think a lot of the negativity side is really coming on the individual piece and with just communication. But that's not to say that marketing and advertising doesn't play a role. I think in recent years we've seen a shift where there's more of a blend between content that is obviously driven by business and corporations, and those that are maybe produced by influencers, but are actually being paid for and influenced by some sort of business behind the scenes. I think there's a lot of influencer content that is now being driven with ulterior motives, and it's hard when that's not transparent. And so I don't see that as being as damaging. And you hear a lot of the really bad stuff on social is often driven by politics. It's often driven by current events, and it's driven by things that can have multiple angles, multiple perspectives. And when somebody, businesses often do not take a stance on that. Rather, you may see back and forth on social media about a current event, and then you might see, oh, there's a paid post where you can get your house renovated, where sometimes business almost seems like it's out of the loop. But I would say if I'm looking at the negative aspects of social media, it's still largely being driven on a personal level. But I do think marketing and advertising plays a role, just not quite the role that some people might think it is yet.
Do you think the majority of the issue then becomes a almost sped up version of sociology that wouldn't necessarily happen without that digital connection and that ease to connect with others? I don't know. It's just kind of a philosophical idea, but what do you think about that?
Yeah, it is interesting because social media is very, very instant. There's this free flow of information where something you could watch something on TV. Sports is a great example where you watch something on TV happen in sports, and within 30 seconds, you're getting perspectives from everybody, from all angles of the world. You're getting it from major figures, you're getting it from other athletes, you're getting it from your own friends, and that instant response is certainly playing a role in that, where first impressions are everything. And not only that, but you see there's this additional element to it where people are then doubling down, and you're getting responses, reactions, and it's this very in-depth conversation, and everything's happening immediately, where there's really no opportunity for the back and forth, or even any time to internalize what it is that's happening out there. It could be something as trivial as sports, as I was talking about before, or something as substantial as a major political movement, an election, something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you start to look at what people are digesting on the internet, at least in the way that I've broken it down, I feel like there's three main areas that people pay attention to. The first is attention grabbers. Maybe it's really started with the Vine. Now it's TikTok, and now it's like YouTube, and everybody's trying to copy TikTok, and
YouTube
Facebook's
Shorts,
got their own thing.
Great example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And then you've got medium to long form content, which is really based in storytelling.
Yep.
This could also encompass a lot of like cinematic shots. There doesn't need to be any words involved, but just you kind of follow that visual. And then you also have debate and discussion. And I don't know which one I want to say first, because that kind of alludes to a certain level of priority, but I say them as equals because people can have a good debate and it be healthy, but they could also have a very negative aspect to it. And you can have that same dichotomy with a good discussion too. There's also bad discussions, and the comment section is obviously where you see that, right? Like a piece of content is created or engineered in such a way where now the comment section is full of a debate. And usually it is, as you alluded to, some political stuff. A lot of it nowadays is just bombardment of political content in some way, shape, or form, even if it's like a social concept or social idea, maybe a stigma that they're attempting to break with the engineering of the content. That then gets this discussion going, but that feeds that algorithm to keep that machine pumping for whatever the ulterior motive is. And so I think it's natural for us, though. There's also a certain level of human nature involved, in the sense that we are obviously very social beings. We have a tendency to want to trade with one another. If it's not for money, it's literally item for item sometimes. And there's a whole marketplace on the internet for that too. And so as we build more complex ways that we go about achieving a means to an end, obviously social media becomes just it's just an e-commerce tool. It's not really a town square in many regards, like the way some people would argue. It can act like it, yeah, totally, but it's an actual tool to conduct deeper levels of human engagement. And so I find it very fascinating, and that's why I'm really excited to have you on the podcast today, because you're obviously a professor at Wayne State University, and so there's a certain level of there's probably a certain prospectus that you go with and talk to the students about at the beginning of the year. And so where do you start with this? Because it seems like you could start at many different points in the discussion of social media and digital marketing. So where do you typically like to begin with your classes?
Man, well, so with social media, if I'm starting at the highest point, the broadest, most ambiguous aspect, I usually will start with the with the larger business idea that in an MBA program, for example, because I teach in the business school, both undergrad and grad levels, and business students are taught first and foremost that the goal of a business is to maximize the value for shareholders. That's been like number one. And it all kind of comes back to that. Social media has several different several different value propositions, and that is only one of them. And as you were kind of alluding to before, the idea of storytelling, the idea of exchanging information and values back and forth and exchanging ideas, that's another way to approach it. But if I'm looking at it from the way I look at it from my own perspective that I like to share with students as well is that social media is an opportunity to build a community, whether you're talking about a business, an individual, or something else entirely, an event, where there are most people who are active on social media. They probably can name you a couple of people that they interact with back and forth on a regular basis. I would bet many of those individuals they've never met in real life. They're just people that they started following, or they started following them. And there's this back and forth. I know I personally feel this way, especially on Twitter and on LinkedIn, where I would argue that most of the people that I communicate with on those platforms are not people I have ever met nor will ever meet. And I do this because I value their input. I value the content that they put out there. On LinkedIn, it's more from a business sense. On Twitter, it's more from a personal sense. And when it all comes down to it, they're providing me with something of value that I consider to be worth my time, worth my energy. And that exchanging of ideas is really valuable. Now, if you move back to the business side, the number one thing I then tell my students is whether it's maximizing value for shareholders, driving brand awareness, or trying to create a community, the number one thing that businesses need to do is to create that value. And I personally think that number one comes through building a community where people feel like they're in a safe space and they can exchange these ideas with others. But the idea of generating value and feeling like you are getting value from these other accounts, whether they're people or businesses, that's really where it all starts for me as both a user and as an educator.
That sounds like a very philosophical place to start, right?
Yeah, well, and it's not just that, but it's a good guiding principle for experiencing growth with social. Nobody's going to follow you because you're putting out self-fulfilling, stuff that's, hey, like we won this award, or hey, I'm great at this. People are going to follow you because they like what you post, and being able to figure out what that is, that's really what it comes down to. Because the other aspect of it is when I look at advertising later in a course with students. Advertising in the social media age is only as good as the value that you're providing them, the people that are receiving it. You might be able to catch somebody with clickbait up front, but that's not going to lead to any sort of meaningful result if you don't follow through and provide them the value that they believe that they're getting when they do click through. So, it is philosophical, but it's also a good principle to follow. Not just in the course, but throughout your entire career working in social and digital in general.
Yeah, totally. Now, from these philosophies, okay, where do you typically start in terms of understanding digital marketing from a platform sense? Do you start with how powerful something like Google is, or where do you start to look to break down where the opportunities are? Or do you look at it where this particular we're going to focus on this particular strategy today? Where do you start from there in terms of the application?
So I do look at strategies first. A textbook that I use actually puts it in an interesting way where they say interactions first, channels second. Okay. Where depending on what it is that you're trying to get out of a channel, you want to think about what the end goal is. You don't want to say, okay, what can I get out of email marketing? What can I get out of social media? But what is it that I want to get out of all of this?
Mhm.
And for me, as a business owner as well, I'm in a B2B space, and so number one thing I usually try to get, I consider to be equivalent to, as currency, is people's emails, people opting into subscribing to an email list. So how do I facilitate that? What is that a function of? Well, okay, I need people to read the content on my website, get value from it, fill out a form. How do they get there? So it's kind of reverse engineering, because once I know where I want people to go, what that end result is, then I can look at the different channels and say, okay, what do I need to put out on social media to bring people here? What do I need to send out via email to my existing customers to bring people here?
Yeah.
Do I need to do any sort of advertising? Do I need to do search engine optimization? What are those different elements that go into it? And what all needs to happen for it to be successful, and how successful can those be? So I do reverse engineer it, start with the end goal, and work backwards to the point where I can look at channels and see how efficient those various channels are at meeting my goals.
What I think is a struggle for a lot of new businesses is that they don't necessarily think that they can work backwards because they don't necessarily know who's going to be receptive to the content and the brand that they're making. So, do you still work backwards in that case?
So yes, I think it's about how you're communicating that that value. How is it that you can essentially sell the process?
Yeah.
And when I work with students, the way that I try to facilitate it is, because we're in a day and age where every student has used social media, every student has been online, everybody thinks that they've got the answers, and it's really been fascinating for me to see when I do turn it into more of an analytics game. I can turn it into numbers. I can quantify the value of these different interactions and these different platforms. That's really how I can better reverse engineer it in such a way where people will understand what it is that I'm getting at.
Well, so what you're alluding to, and the way that I listen to what you just said, is billboards don't work because you can't gather the data from that activity, from that dollar amount that you're spending. But what you're saying is that with everything that you spend online through digital marketing, there's now a paper trail and a results trail that follow.
Yeah.
And that becomes kind of a steering wheel.
Yeah, and there is, I'm not a billboard fan. I will say you can find a way to derive value from it. There are ways. I will say it's not foolproof. It's not, you can't absolutely attribute certain actions to it. But there's a time and a place for it. Having said that, everything in digital, everything that works online can be better attributed. Sometimes you can't fully attribute at certain activities. And I also think that given the way that everybody is mobile now, has made proper attribution a little bit more difficult, because there was a time 10 years ago when mobile traffic was pretty low, and people were still online almost as much as they are today. They're just on computers. Computers could track all of your actions. They saw when you clicked on that first ad. They saw the different opportunities that led to you making a purchase. Today, you may see an ad first when you're at your desk. Then you may see something similar when you're on your phone, on social media. And they say that it takes an average of 7 interactions with a brand before somebody makes a purchase. So right now, most of those interactions it's very difficult for us as marketers, for analysts, for anybody to truly grasp all of those interactions into what leads to that final purchase. There are some impulse buys that happen. We've all done it, where we see an ad that
100%.
gets us like, yeah, I'll spend $10. Sure. I'll buy this t-shirt for $15. Sure. There are some of those that still happen. But when you think about something that's a little bit more expensive, something that's a little bit more requires a little bit more thought and more intention. Think about something like Amazon. Like if you want to go on Amazon and you're going to buy a patio set, chances are you're not just going to go and buy something immediately. You might, but chances are you're going to do some of your research. You're going to do, your information search in that process. But you may have so many interactions with this brand before you finally purchase.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard for us to fully capture all of those. A lot of people like to I use private browsing on my phone almost exclusively. And so everything I do on my phone is not being attributed to what if I'm here in my office and I make a final purchase on the computer, everything that I did on my phone is probably not being captured unless I'm already logged in. And the other on top of that is, do you
find that to be important, by the way, that privacy, that security of your data? Is that something that more people should value?
Well, for me, I just like people being able to track everything that I'm doing. On my phone, I'm doing a lot more obscure searching. Usually it's me trying to figure out an answer to a question that I might have off the top of my head, like who sang that song that I just heard in the restaurant? I know it's this band, and so I'll search them. Oh, it's that song. I don't want to get ads related to that for the rest of my life.
Totally. Right.
I remember in the early days of social media advertising, I was doing some research for an engagement ring for my now wife. And I went through the process pretty quick. Well, I find that in the 4 months after I bought this engagement ring, I was getting ads for engagement rings just nonstop. And it was clear that the advertising was behind. I had already made the purchase. I did minimal research. I mean, I did enough research before I knew what I was going to do. But this was back in a time when the algorithms were only geo-targeting me and triangulating what my interests were after I had already made my purchase. And so today, everybody's got a feeling of, Facebook's listening to us. Alexa from Amazon is listening to us. And that may be, but at the same time, I don't think people realize just how much of their personal information and how much of their search history and the questions and the websites they visit, that really does paint a full picture of who you are, whether that be accurate or not. And so I try to keep the ads that get served to me at a minimum. That's not to say that I don't get any. I mean, I get plenty of social media ads, and I'm still doing the same thing on my computer, but it does help.
I've got some bad news for you, and maybe it's good news though, because today's episode is actually brought to you by K Jeweler. Every kiss begins with K. All right, so you can't get away from it, Nick. It just follows you around no matter what you do.
It never goes away.
Never goes away. But maybe it helps actually from a consumer standpoint, because what you're saying is actually saying that, well, if you control the traffic flow of what information gets out there about what you're searching, you can actually better procure a better customer experience, possibly.
Yeah, I try not to think too much about that, because I don't want to try. You could go crazy trying to manipulate that. But as somebody who works in the field, I do notice that. I do see when I'm big into basketball, for example. I've been spending a lot of the last month, just researching various players, prospects, watching teams. So I get ads on Twitter about all of these different subscription services. Subscribe to The Athletic and read this article on Larry Bird. And it's like, yes, that is for me, and I'm very interested. But at the same time, if I think about I could curate as custom an experience as possible, but to me, those don't really give me the value that I'm looking for. Reverting back to my original philosophical idea, if I want to be only served ads of things that I might actually buy or invest in, it's probably not stuff that I am just searching on a whim or looking at online randomly. And that's really the challenge that we're faced with, is that, I don't have any data to back this up, but I would argue that most things that people are looking for online are not things that they're actually trying to buy. But then again, that may be
that's probably
that
true.
may also be the age-old idea of businesses are trying to create a need. And so if they can create that need from you to go buy that NBA Jam t-shirt, okay, maybe I will go in and buy that, even though I did not have any thought into that in the past.
Yeah.
So it's two sides. There's two sides.
Right. Right. Okay. So you're a big NBA fan. Are the Pistons your team, or do you have another
Oh
team
yes,
in the league?
yes, they have been my whole life.
Yeah. Do you think that they should go back to the teal jerseys, or do you like
No.
the classic red, white, and blue?
The teal is good for one game a year.
Okay.
But I lived through the teal era, and most people that want the teal jerseys back were not around for the teal era and do not remember just how bad they were.
Yes.
And I think people forget that
Yes.
the as soon as the teal era ended, they started winning. They were 32-50 the last year with the teal.
That's true.
They then turned around and were 50-32 the next year when they went back to red, white, and blue.
That's true. I do remember that, and it was pretty sudden. It was almost overnight. But I will say, I think that they should incorporate the horse in some way.
Yeah,
it would be nice to have how, but I think they should.
It's been a back and forth. For a while, the main logo was the horse with the tailpipes. Now it's not. It's just the ball, right, which I think is kind of bland.
It's too bland. Yeah, there's a happy medium somewhere.
There needs to be a medium there, a happy medium there somewhere. It's going to be interesting because just in sports in general, you see logos going more back to the modular,
it's true,
just shapes, not as much creativity. Back in the early 2000s, there was the horse for the Pistons. The Timberwolves actually had a wolf. The Raptors had that dinosaur dribbling a basketball.
Yep.
The Hawks actually had that bird with the massive wingspan. So the Vancouver Grizzlies had a bear, and now it's like this really strange looking face. It might be a bear. It might be a metaphor. So it really is kind of strange, but I'm with you on that.
So I wonder why. Maybe there's some sort of psychological reason why these, logo designers decided to get away from, something like that to get to more like vector / old printing press style logos.
Yeah, I think it's just more, trends are very cyclical.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say next. Yeah.
I think, what was it? Maybe 40 to 50 years ago, I think it was more like this, more squares and shapes. More words, word art, if you will.
Yep.
And I'm sure eventually we'll go back to the more of the designs in the future.
It's so wild to me. I know that there's probably something deeper there from a human level as to why we do that. And of course, then you take that type of design, that type of content, you put something together, and now you've got something tangible on the internet to start marketing that was different than what you once had. And I would say that right away, my first intuitive thought is that a business will change up like that because it just re-energizes or revigorates that advertising effort. Right?
Yeah, and it brings a whole new sense of brand up to the viewers. And you saw a lot of redesigns in the early .com era in an effort to be more online, more, hey, this is our new sleek logo.
Yeah.
And it looks more online friendly, whatever that meant. Yeah. And I don't know if many are still using those types of logos that they came up with in the early 2000s. But really the best branding is the logo that is simple and timeless. The Nike swoosh is never going to change. The Coca-Cola word is never going to change. But it's these smaller brands. And I mean, Facebook is an example of a business that is constantly changing, but they can make a change with their UX and the interface in general. And people might complain about it for a couple of weeks, but then it just becomes common, normal. Facebook, if you look at what Facebook looked like, the Facebook.com homepage when you were logged in 2008, very, 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 very different from today, to the point where you're thinking like, holy crap, that was so long ago. But that is the beauty of the internet, and being a company like Facebook, you can make a change. People aren't going to leave. You may lose a couple people, but people are just going to get used to it. And essentially those few key big players are setting the trends for user experience. And that's kind of and that's a big difference. That's what sets apart social media from, say, the automotive industry. The automotive industry, we keep talking about, oh, we're going to have autonomous vehicles soon. 10 years ago, we were 5 years away from having autonomous vehicles. Right. Now we have some, but nothing, like that's not the norm at all.
Right.
We're still 5 years away.
Right.
And it's because there's no harm in changing social media, the social media user experience. But with autonomous vehicles, people could die. Yeah. You're changing the entire infrastructure of cities, of the world, of everything. And so you're stuck with on social media, oh, Facebook is now Meta. Well, okay, what does that mean? Nothing. We're still using Facebook like we have. But with driverless cars, suddenly I'm not in control of my own life, driving from point A to point B. And I heard about this autonomous Uber that got in this fiery crash. No, thank you. There's the internet makes it where social media is accelerating at such a faster pace than anything we've ever seen before. And it's really because there are no true barriers and there's no real penalty. I mean, Facebook is being sued left and right. They get called in front of Congress and nothing has changed. So, yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So we were talking about obviously how logos change over time, maybe through some sort of business necessity. Then that leads into the conversation about how even an individual website has evolved over time. And that evolution probably won't stop, likely.
Right.
That'll continue. And so from Facebook not being an app to then being an app to then having a complete redesign, adding marketplace, adding all of these other features, now adding Instagram Reels, and now changing to new brand altogether, a complete logo change and brand name change. We're seeing now them wanting to push into a space called the metaverse. Okay.
Oh yes, metaverse.
Are you talking about this yet with your classes? And if so, what are your thoughts and what do you talk about?
So there's two things that have been happening in the last few years. To really quickly touch on your piece on the websites, I do think we are at a plateau point for web design where I think we are at a point where, like, I created my website for my business almost 4 years ago. It's still fairly relevant. Usually before then, it was every 4 years you needed a new website. There was something happening. Now that we are in the responsive website era where most traffic is coming to mobile, and yet major e-commerce is still happening on desktop, if you design your website properly, you should be good for a while until that rebrand happens or until something really significant shifts in the way that we consume the internet. Now, that could be the metaverse. And I will be the first to tell you I'm not as well versed in the metaverse as some people. But the two big shifts that we see happening right now in terms of content creation that's changing, one is the metaverse. What is that going to look like? How will people exist in that? Is it just like The Sims where, you just have an avatar moving around, or will it be something more? How do you exchange? How do businesses exist? How do you exist? Is it like Inception, where if you die in the, like The Matrix, where if you die in the metaverse, you die in real life? Like, I don't know. But then the other side of that is something that I've gotten more interested in and learning more about. And that is the world of, and I know that these are intertwined, and that is the world of crypto and NFTs. Just because it's a little bit more manageable. And while they are certainly intertwined, I see cryptocurrency and metaverse being interlinked for a long time. This digital first universe where all of this takes place is fascinating to me, if nothing else than because of the idea that people are becoming more and more focused in an online world, when at the same time, as we hopefully are reaching the end of this pandemic, people are also talking about being able to be in person and having these real world experiences. How is it that these two are going to collide and coexist? What is the future? And it really deals with a lot of elements of the world. Remote work. Do we go back? What's it like in the office? What is the real world like? The idea right now that most of the businesses that I talk to is if they have a retail presence, they need to be providing an experience. They need to be providing an Instagrammable experience, something where the customer can go and be like, wow, this is cool. I need to document this and put it on my story. Because if it's in the real world, it needs to be able to be posted online. Then on the other side, if you're online, how does it relate to the real world? So all of this long responses, I don't really know. I just know that we are at an interesting point where people want to spend more time doing things in the real world, but they also want to spend more time being online. How those are going to connect, I am not sure.
Well, it's interesting that you believe, and you may very well be right, that website design and the functional application of a website is pretty much tapped out. There's probably not too many more creative, revolutions that you can plug into a website. There's video, there's text, there's audio, there's animation.
Yeah.
GIFs. Yeah.
GIFs or GIFs, whatever. I think that's one element that is untapped in that we've seen websites that have videos on auto loop in the background. Those are kind of too much. We've seen websites where the music just starts playing. Like, oh God, what is this?
Yeah.
But
I always have the speakers on too loud. When a website has music playing. So
but then there's the idea of the GIF where there's no audio and it's just a short, essentially an animation.
Yep.
That offers websites a new level of interactivity. And I do think that if there's one more step we could take, it's websites becoming more of a choose your own adventure, where the user is going in and making choices based on what they want to get out of it.
Interesting.
I don't know how far away we are from that. I try to stay on top of it. I do teach a user experience course at another school, and the elements are pretty. I mean, the best practices have pretty much remained the same. I think in 2018 when I built my website, it was pretty good for the time. It was, I had a good grasp of what worked and what didn't work. I've made content changes, of course, and I blog and stuff, but I don't see myself changing it. The whole design anytime soon, partially because there's no need to. I'm at a point where I don't see what's next. And if we get to the choose your own adventure side, I've built my website in such a way where I can integrate it into what I have already. So I do think, when I say plateau, 10 years from now, it's going to look different, of course. But from 2000 to 2018, there were probably 5 different major shifts in web design that occurred. Now you're looking at over 4 years now where there really hasn't been anything significant. I mean, we're still bringing some companies into the mobile website age. This last stage has been has taken a while, and part of it is the user experience. Part of it will be the metaverse that will be part of it. But then the other side is, how will the big players dictate this? Because Google, Facebook, and Amazon, they also will be able to dictate what our websites look like. If Google comes out tomorrow and says, "Hey, mobile websites aren't going to appear on search anymore," okay, that they would never say that, but suddenly I have to make a change. So
totally,
a lot of it is also based on the big players.
Well, when you mention how you want to almost have a pick your own adventure or choose your own ending type of a website, essentially a very customized user experience based website, that brings to mind apps. Just any app that's on your phone that's of value to you, that you actually use, because let's just be honest, there are a lot of apps that are on our phones that we don't use whatsoever. Okay. The ones that we do use do have that element of being able to engage with it on multiple different levels. There's many different dynamics. There's very few apps that we use that just do one thing. Very few. I mean, there's one that I have that where actually very similar to, you know, what you were mentioning earlier, where you are wondering, hey, what's this song? You know, I actually have an app where it's like I just turn it on.
Shazam.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
I use Shazam, but sometimes it's too late, you know, or it's so faint I can't pick it up.
Yep.
And I wish I had Shazam as a child, because, you know, I recall many instances as a kid, like, wow, I like this song. Like, what was this? And now I can go back and find it, of course. But, you know, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because I look at my apps and every now and then I'll go through and try to delete the ones that I don't use. And I only have apps that I do use.
Yeah.
But I do find myself using them in more and more specific situations.
Interesting.
But it depends, you know, like Wikipedia, I'm only going to use that app for when I'm curious about something and I need to figure out, to learn more about something.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have like a calorie counting app that I only use when I'm eating and working out. There's a couple, obviously there's apps like Netflix and Disney Plus that I'll use. Watched an episode of Obi-Wan yesterday on my phone. But it does kind of depend on, for me, like back to the value piece, you know, like, do I really need the Wikipedia app, for example, or can I just Google it on my little Safari app and get the same thing? But I think the number one value that apps provide me, at least, is that I'm logged in.
Oh, right.
I can add things to an account because, I'm on private mode, so I'm not logged into anything in my Safari.
Yeah.
But, you know, I have my banking app. I have all these on-demand video subscription, the video subscription things. I have all my social networks. You know, they all serve a purpose. But I've also found that most apps I am logged in on, which is more of a convenience than anything else. If I didn't have to log into any of these things, I wouldn't need them. So,
yeah, that's very true. You know, in many ways, the Wikipedia app is just a shortcut. So it's allowing you to not have 2 extra steps, 3 extra steps, whatever it is. You're there, you can get lost in the information however you want to get lost into it. But you're having that experience of getting lost in the information. The calorie counting app, it does a very specific thing, but you are able to use it in a functional way that provides value to an experience of getting more fit, whatever your goal is there, right?
And you can see your progression, right? A lot of it is, you know, how does what you're doing now compare to what you did before?
Yeah,
you know, you have history.
Yeah, and I love that, because I do have a lot of apps that I will delete after maybe 1 use or 2 use. You know, I know that I'm not going to have that long-term relationship or experience doing that one mundane thing, right? So yeah. That's interesting.
Well, and you have something like an event-centric app, which I think will make a comeback as people go to more and more in-person events. But at least from the business side, most of the larger conventions that I would go to, they all had an app. And I would always download them because they're always good for networking and helps with the agenda and stuff like that. Then as soon as it's over, I'm out. I'll delete it.
Totally.
And that's a challenge for businesses. You know, you get all this content, you get all this data. How can you keep people connected to your application after the fact? And some have done a good job of it. They can gamify, they can offer discounts, incentives, networking, things like that. But it is an inherent challenge for businesses, because if a business is going to go invest in an app, there needs to be a full customer life cycle and retention strategy, many which fail instantly. You know, a lot of it is based too on loyalty and being able to contribute things. Like the Taco Bell app works so well because they're constantly putting out deals. They have different opportunities for people to interact with each other, and they're really focused and targeted on Gen Z because they know that that's their number one clientele. But then also, they're always running new campaigns. The same applies to Burger King. A lot of these food places where, you know, that's not everybody's had the food before. It's more about when you drive past a whole line of them on the street, you're like, you know what? I am going to go to Taco Bell. I just saw that ad, or I have the app. I'm going to go there instead. How do you stand out in that instant? And apps are really good for achieving that.
That's interesting. Well, yeah, because I probably would never use the Taco Bell app if they weren't giving away some sort of thing. I don't use the Taco Bell app, actually. But if I were to, I probably wouldn't use it unless it had some sort of additional function. By the way, speaking of Taco Bell, I have a bone to pick with Taco Bell right now, okay? And hopefully they're watching. I don't know if you know this, Nick, but a cheesy gordita crunch at Taco Bell costs $4.99 now. Have you ever had a cheesy gordita crunch?
Of course,
just by itself.
They're great.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Just by itself? Wow.
Just by itself. Yeah.
That's
so I'm gonna put you up on some game, as they say. Okay. Here we go. Just get a hard shell taco. It's $1.30. Mm-hmm. Then add pita, which is like they charge you like 20 cents. Add spicy ranch.
Yeah.
Ask for extra because it's always better. and then add cheese. You're spending $2.25 every time.
At Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's a cheesy gordita crunch, but you're saving, it's 50% off. So
and you're getting most of what you're looking. Where's the meat in there? Where's the? Did you add the?
The meat comes naturally on the hard shell taco.
Oh, right, because you're getting a hard shell taco. Oh,
that's right.
Wow,
I know.
That's smart.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna do that next time. I don't go to Taco Bell very often, as I said, I'm counting the calories. But I will do that. I'm gonna make a trip and just see what they do when I ask them for that.
And obviously, when you present it humorously, have fun with them, so they're not, gonna give you a hard time.
Not like you're trying to pull a fast one on them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
they're usually pretty humorous about. They
have a ton of respect for me when I get to that window. They're like, "Hey, you're a legend. You know how to work Taco Bell." Anyway, okay. So, Nick, before we take off today, what is one thing that a business can do right now that they should be doing right now to improve their business when it comes to digital marketing?
Well, one thing.
One thing. That's it. Man. If they had to pick one thing.
If you have to pick one thing, you need to be able to look at your numbers that come with all of your various digital marketing activities. And you need to evaluate whether or not, one, that you make sure that you can figure out if it's providing any value to you, either from brand awareness or on the bottom line. But then two, use those numbers to dictate what's next. Maybe you go in and you can, advanced marketing people are going to be able to figure out a way to correlate certain numbers to certain outcomes, qualitative outcomes, if you will. Brand awareness, for example, right? But you need to be able to, your digital marketing should be able to quantify your successes in marketing. And if they can't, that's what you need to figure out, is you need to be able to go in and do that. Or if you go in and you look at your analytics and you say, wow, we're actually terrible, hopefully that will tell you a story and tell you where you need to focus your time and effort. Because every business that does a full suite of digital marketing, they're very inefficient somewhere. Where that is, it varies on business, varies on their mastery of the different channels, and it varies based on the people that are doing it. And no strategy is going to be successful without being able to look at the numbers, analyze, evaluate, and update, adjust your strategy accordingly.
That's very true. Yeah, you could be spending all the money in the world you want on cool videos or cool photos, but if you don't know who's watching it, if you don't know who's engaging with it, if you don't know how long they're engaging with it, you don't know how to make the proper adjustments to then use that dollar spend more effectively and efficiently. I love it. Yeah. Good stuff, Nick. Well, I hope that you come back on the show. I think that you're a great guest, and I think that we've got more to dive into, other rabbit holes to go down when it comes to digital marketing.
Yeah, I'll come back after I go to Taco Bell and I'll report back.
Let me know. Let me know how it goes. And by the way, just you can tell whoever, this isn't a secret. So this is the first time I've publicly made an acknowledgement about it, but it's been bothering me for a while. So
well, it's on social media has got all sorts of fast food hacks. I'm going to go in with a couple different ones. I'm sure there's some other Taco Bell hacks I can figure out and save $4 on my meal.
yeah, exactly. Hey, every dollar counts, and you can put that toward your advertising spend in digital marketing.
That's true. Yeah, that $4 could lead to 15,
That's right.
20 clicks. So
That's right. That's a big deal.
That's true.
I love it, dude. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and we'll definitely have you back on the show. So thanks for your time today, Nick.
Thanks for having me.